in December, we hit 10 million US in monthly revenue. So that gets us to 120 million annual recurring revenue run rate. In 26, we're projecting roughly about 180 to 200 million full year revenue, which gets us to roughly about a 300 million annual recurring run rate by the end of 26.
I'm delighted to be joined by Danny Yeung, CEO of Prenetics, the parent company of what is now known as the fastest growing supplement brand. So I really want to dive into the weeds of the growth and how you've kind of facilitated such a crazy growth rate over the last 12 to 18 months. You've almost got this like roster of experts that really bring that credibility layer.
When you're launching any new brand, how do you get people's attention? And we're so fortunate and proud to have David as our co-founder for IM8.
So I think a big topic across D2C brands right now is trying to get away from the handcuffs of Facebook. Is the majority of your mix still focused on Meta as the primary driver of growth?
In this type of setting, our speed is our biggest advantage. We're never going to be a comfortable company.
Where are you seeing AI drive the most value to the business in terms of efficiency gains currently?
One thing that we also did from day one that really helped the growth. From day one,
You're trying to produce unusual outcomes, so you need unusual inputs, I guess. Well, yeah, welcome back to another episode of D2C Diaries. I'm delighted to be joined by Danny Yeung, CEO of Prenetics, a publicly listed company and the parent company of what is now known as the fastest growing supplement brand of all time in the consumer space. So yeah, thank you for joining me, Danny. Really excited to dig into the story of Prenetics and IM8 today.
Yeah, thank you, Olly, for having me.
As with any guest, want to really dive into the weeds of, obviously, I mentioned prior to starting the recording, watched quite a few of your other podcasts and heard a lot of the backstory. I really want to dive into the weeds of the growth and how you've kind of facilitated such a crazy growth rate over the last 12 to 18 months. But as with every guest, it'd be great just to start with a bit of a backstory about yourself, Prenetics, and maybe a bit about how IM8 came to be.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Olly. It's a pleasure to be here. Interestingly enough, when you guys did the deep dive, the podcast, I think it was probably 8 to 9 months ago. Yeah. Somewhere in that. Over in the last year, I listened to that. My whole team listened to that. I was like, wow, hey, Olly, these guys really know what they're talking about, right? The challenges, how we think about the website, the founder knows, all of that stuff was spot on. So really appreciate you guys doing that deep dive early on, right? And then of course afterwards, a lot of guys copy you guys, which is always good to see, and deep dives on us and etc. Yeah, so very glad to be on the show here.
I appreciate you watching that as well. Obviously, I'll link the other episode, the previous episode, down below. So if anyone wants to go and have a look at the deep dive we did on IM8, I appreciate you sending us some product as well. And both me and Lucas have been avid users of IM8 since you shipped us over the box, and it's amazing product.
Great. Thank you. So Olly, just a quick background about myself. I grew up in the US, always been an entrepreneur. I started working at the age of 15. So very early, my first job was a telemarketer. I got my first start in entrepreneurship at the age of 25. And it was actually a restaurant business. I franchised a dessert chain into the US. At the age of 25, I did that for about 3 to 4 years. I then did a hotel furniture business, import-export from China into the US, eventually working on some large hotel projects like MGM, City Center, in Vegas. I also did that for about 3 to 4 years. And in 2010, I always had a knack or a passion for technology and interest in that sector. And I moved to Hong Kong in 2010 to launch an e-commerce company. And that model was actually going after the Groupon business idea. Right? I moved to Hong Kong. Again, had no e-commerce background. Within 6 months, our monthly revenues grew to 1 million monthly USD in revenues. At the same time, when Groupon went international, they acquired 51% majority stake in my company. 3 to 4 years later, they bought the rest. When I was at Groupon, I was then made the East Asia CEO. So basically took that, basically from zero, and then we went to, I think when I left, we were doing about, 200 million annual revenues, and we're the largest e-commerce company in the region, right? So, so I think, again, to be fair, I think those 3-4 years, those were really crazy growth times. I'm sure you remember Groupon days. And that really gave me a lot of background in DTC, consumer, direct to consumer, all the customer funnels, landing pages, paid marketing, etc. However, after Groupon, I went into the healthcare route, right? So I started Prenetics. I wanted to get into healthcare, and specifically DNA testing. And interestingly enough, at that time, everyone expected me to kind of do DTC genetic testing. But back in 2014, early on, when I was doing some acquisition testing and funnel trialing, the customer acquisition cost at that time was way too expensive. So we never even launched a DTC DNA test in 2014, right? Instead, we went B2B2C, working with very large insurance companies, for them to provide DNA tests as a value added service. So did that for really about a good, 4 to 5 years. When COVID hit, we pivoted our whole operations to doing PCR testing. So we went basically, from again, a DNA test lab to doing PCR testing, at scale, right? So I remember early on in 2020, again, there was a lot of uncertainty. We didn't know what we were going to do, right? I think the whole world didn't know. And then we just started offering PCR testing to the community to help out. It was very difficult to do PCR testing in Hong Kong. We started out just doing 100 tests on a daily basis. At the height of our PCR testing, we're doing 40,000 tests daily. And of course, we had to work with the government, Hong Kong government. We worked for the UK primarily. So those 3 years from 2020 to end of 2022, we did, crazy amounts of testing. It was like, 800 million USD in revenue. We did, cumulatively over 28 million labor tests. So, scale, the complexity, supply chain, people, management, data security, you name it, everything happened all, in a such fast manner of time there.
That's when that makes consumer look easy, I guess. That's when they're that much complexity.
To be fair, when I think about those times, it does make it easier, seem much easier, because at that time, again, you can't get, a single PCR test wrong, right? False positives, false negatives, etc. Right? And we had a workforce of about 2,000-3,000 people at one point, right? Just to because it was a huge logistical challenge.
Yeah, amazing journey. Very, very varied, I guess, experience there. But and then 2022, you listed the business public. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. Right, towards the tail end of COVID, we thought this was a good opportunity, because at one point we knew COVID would end, but we wanted to be in control of our own destiny, right? So we felt going to the public markets on the NASDAQ was one of those ways. So we listed on the NASDAQ, in the middle of 2022.
Makes sense. So then what was the journey from there to IM8? Obviously IM8 launched December 2024, I believe.
Correct.
What did the 2 years in between there look like, and what drew you to that opportunity? What brought you to consumer health products in that category?
Yeah, correct. When after COVID, and of course our business plummeted by 90%. All right. So it was like there was no replacement for COVID, just given how do you replace 40,000 tests on a daily basis, right? Impossible.
Yeah.
And then so we started thinking, hey, what do we do? We had cash, we had the determination, we had the team in place and structure. And then we started thinking, okay, what are the areas where we can potentially tackle a very large addressable market, put great science behind it, and leverage off our last 10 years of clinical background, right? And then so we felt, again, the consumer supplement space, there's a lot of opportunity there. And then so this is, basically in the middle of 2023 when we started first thinking about this. At the same time as we're thinking about this, I had the opportunity to meet with, David Beckham via my very good friend, Michelle Lamoureux. He's the owner of Tatler Asia, which is a big media sports lifestyle company. And then he was, asking me, I was just with dinner with Michelle. He was like, hey, Danny, I want to meet, David again in 2 weeks. Do you want to join? I'm like, why not? Right. And it was just really off of that simple conversation. And then, of course, when I went over to London, I didn't really have an agenda because, I'm not going to, it's David Beckham you're talking to, right? You
Yeah.
don't want to just pitch him something. It was just really more about understanding him as a person, what his interests are. And then it was a great time in his life where I think he really wanted to give back to the community. And he was just approaching 50 years old. He knew he had a great following, a big following, a global following. And when we met, we started brainstorming what are the things that we can potentially do together. And he was very intrigued about my background from the consumer side at Groupon, as well as the clinical science for Prenetics, right? So those two kind of converged. And I think, for David, the last 30 years, many individuals, companies, etc., has asked him to do something in this space, but he didn't do. He rejected all those opportunities, and then so when we finally agreed to do this together, and him coming on board as a co-founder, I mean, it was a very, very pivotal moment, and to get for us to kind of cut through the noise, right? Because I think when you're launching any new brand, there's just so much noise. How do you get people's attention? And so we're so happy and fortunate and proud to have David as our co-founder for IM8.
Yeah, I feel like he's like the pinnacle of UK celebrity, right? He's probably big in America and big in other countries, but he's like the top of our especially from like the last 20, 30 years in the UK. Yeah, interesting that I know from listening to previous podcasts, it was very much built around solving a problem that he'd had through his own life, his own consumption of multiple supplements, and try to combine that into one holistic routine. And we talk a lot about often brands that are founded from that, like solving a problem for the individual first before scaling it up to solve it for the market, are often the ones that go the furthest. And I guess you can see the power and the impact he's had on the brand. And has that translated effectively to every market? I imagine it has, but I always thought his celebrity was almost larger in the UK than elsewhere. But yeah, he's obviously a huge name.
Yeah, I mean, exactly as you mentioned, Olly, I think the core principle when we started chatting was even for David and Victoria, right? They were taking multiple supplements on a daily basis. It was like 12, 13, 14, 15. And the reality was, he felt it was quite annoying. And there must be a better way to do it, right? At clinical effective dosages with a product that tastes good. And of course, he's tried other products, etc., but he just never stood to it. And then so we went say, you know what? There must be something that we can do to simplify the nutrition routine, because it's not just for David. I mean, there's so many other people. I mean, millions of people around the world that face the similar issues, right? Is that, hey, once you start taking supplements, you don't want to just take a multivitamin, right? Because that's just like very basic. You start getting into, CoQ10, MSM, probiotics, joints, et cetera, et cetera. So once you start taking supplements, it's easily you're taking 12, 13, 14, 15 supplements on a daily basis. And the reality of that is very difficult to maintain that routine. And then so we came out with IM8, which again, the core principle was that with IM8, our daily ultimate essentials, you replace 16 different supplements in one drink that you take every day, which also tastes good, right? So we made a big focus on not just the scientific formulation, but the whole customer experience, leading from time you get the package to the time you consume it and the ongoing communications afterwards.
Yeah, I feel like you've got that perfect combination there of the science backing, the credibility there, and the credibility of David. And obviously, you've expanded that expert network or the across the brand. I feel like that's something that we're definitely seeing more of as like an entry requirement within the supplement space. Like there's so many brands popping up in supplementation. And I think those differentiation factors are just going to be so important through 2026 as that noise continues. How have you approached, you've obviously then had Sabalenka. I know you've had doctors from and head researchers from NASA, I believe. I've seen UFC doctors. You've almost got this like roster of experts that really bring that credibility layer and allow you to leverage their like positioning and the messaging in creative that can, I imagine, brings a lot of diversification and attracts different audiences. How have you approached the expansion of that over time?
No, 100%, Ali. I think that was also very important from day one when me and David Yeung co-founded IM8, right? It's like, hey, we wanted to bring in the best scientists. That was also diversified, right? It's not just someone that was good with formulation. It's bringing in, doctors from different fields, cardiologists, surgeons, Dr. Don, for example, from Mayo Clinic, right? From day one, we knew we couldn't build this brand alone on David. Right? And David also didn't want that, right? We also didn't want that because that's too much dependency on him as an individual. Again, which isn't fair, right? And I think a lot of times where, to be fair, I think, when David previously got a lot of these opportunities to do something in this category, I think a lot of the other brands or individuals, they really wanted, the brand just to be him, right? And we felt from day one, hey, for this brand to survive the test of time, we're talking about 5, 10, 15, 20 years, the scientific basis needed to be very, very strong from day one. So from day one, we recruited, world-class scientific advisory board, and the likes, again, with Dr. Don, even the former chief scientist of NASA, right? James Green. And so we brought along a really amazing scientific team that came together in different specialties to co-create the formulation, which you see now. Right. And so that was very important for us because, again, we really wanted to see, okay, how can someone challenge the product? And so we wanted to check off all these different challenges. So from day one, we had clinical trials. We also had NSF certification for sport. And so that means if you're an athlete, it's free from 280 banned substances, heavy metals, etc., because that's very important given David's status as an athlete.
Yeah, I think it's such a smart move because I think when you see brands that almost completely build the proposition and position around one individual, and that I think it has a inherent risk in it, but it also has a limit on who they appeal to and who they attract to. And I think you've obviously leveraged David so effectively. Anybody watching, go and look through IM8's funnels and Danny's team's funnels and how they use the individuals that he's mentioned in the ads and then pull that through the customer journey and how that builds congruency and how that builds trust and I'm sure how that drives conversion and actual KPIs and metrics. But it's really impressive to see that there's so many strands to that strategy. It's not just like one or two individuals. And I think within there, it just builds a broader appeal beyond just the product and the impact they have on products as well, which is super interesting.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, I think, last June, we also brought along, world number 1 tennis player, Arina Sabalenka, right? And then so I think with her addition, that also further, gave us so much credibility because you're talking about someone which is, playing at the top of her game, right? And the interesting thing about how that relationship got started, it was fully organic, right? Her performance coach, Jason Stacy, started taking the product in January of last year. After about a month, he felt a difference in the product, and then he suggested to Rena, "Hey, I felt a difference. We're not doing." I mean, again, they were at the same time looking for a new supplement stack, right? Because they were taking a bunch of stuff which they felt didn't work, and once they were on IM8, and again at Arena's level, they're testing, they're monitoring a daily basis in terms of how she's feeling. Her diet, her training, everything. And then after about 3 months, her team contacted me and said, "Hey, Arena's been on her product for about 3 months. Can we partner together?" So I was like, of course, right? So I think when you get that level of validation, the product works.
100%. She's on an absolute run at the moment as well. I think she just won a tournament without losing. So hopefully she wins the Australian Open and you can leverage that.
Yeah, well. Exactly, right? So she just won the Brisbane International, right? Without losing a set. Yeah. So that was, quite amazing. The interesting, of course, she won the US Open. We also sponsor another athlete, Gabby Dabrowski. And interestingly enough, she also won the US Open in the doubles. Right? And so last year.
All I, mate. All I, mate. Amazing. Well, great to hear the backstory. I'd love to switch gears firstly to just recap a bit of the financial performance and the growth rate, because I think it's been astronomical. Obviously, you guys have got that extra level of scrutiny of having to make all of your numbers public to the markets. And I've seen many threads on Twitter breaking down financial performance. But growth rate year over year. I saw Q3 2025 results of 23.6 million, but I think the percentage change year on year was up 560%, right? So
Yeah,
crazy
correct. I mean,
growth.
yeah. Mhm.
And I don't know the actual numbers, but I've seen reported run rates of like 120 million AR, but I'm sure that's growing exponentially month on month. But what really struck out to me is that the path to profitability that you've been on and like the intention that's run across that process. I'd love to just understand a bit more about how you set up that growth strategy from sort of day one and how that's then played out with the compounding, obviously your subscription brand cohorts coming through, and that providing that foundation for profitability over the last couple of quarters.
Sure. I mean, just give you again the details in terms of financial performance and how we've been able to scale, right? So last December, which was our first full month of launching the brand, we did 581,000 USD in monthly revenue. Yeah, in December we hit 10 million US in monthly revenue, right? So that gets us to 120 million annual recurring revenue run rate. Yeah, so the growth has been crazy, right? So to be fair, we didn't expect this level of uptake so fast. And our initial projections, for the full year of 2025 was in the vicinity of about 30 million USD, which to be fair is still quite an optimistic figure, right? For a new brand going out the gate.
Yeah.
In
to 3x, that's pretty crazy.
In a competitive environment, right? So we ended basically full year 2025 at roughly 60 million USD, because that's the full year revenue. And then you have the annual recurring revenue, which you're taking basically 10 million from December and multiply by 12. So that's where you get 120 million, right? And then, so the growth has been quite crazy. And of course, it's been quite relentless from the first month until the last month of last year. Right?
Yeah, and I can imagine like the operations and the just resourcing that growth journey must be such a task. I'd love to chat quickly before we dive into that, just on like the mix and like the approach to growth. Obviously, we've analyzed in detail your meta strategy, your website strategy, how those two things work together. Is the majority of your mix still focused on meta as the primary driver of growth? How has that kind of shaped out as the years progressed and that revenue is accelerated?
Sure. So I think I think in the first year is again, I think the challenge for any new brand or entrepreneur, etc., is they may try to focus on too many different channels, right? Without really getting one or two of the core channels, right? So for 25, we mainly focus this on Meta and Google, right? So realistically, Meta is roughly about 80% of where we spend, and then the rest in Google. With that being said, now this year we're going to be diversifying this a little bit more to multiple channels. Because again, we're looking for new audiences, new individuals that haven't seen the brand yet. But in 25, we really wanted to focus on those two specific channels. Right?
Yeah, and I think we preach a focus a lot. I think those two channels alone can, and you've proven that builds such a monster business still when you get them right. And it requires that real depth of focus to do them to the standard that you've achieved before you then layer on more complexity of the TikToks, the other channels that then also tend to be less incremental, like day one performance wise.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And then again, we wanted to do a lot of the conversions. Again, roughly 98% of our conversions now happen on our website, right? IM8Health.com. We have a few percentage on Amazon, just in the US. But given, again, we feel that we have such a strong brand, and strong offering, we prefer, we rather have all of the transactions on our own website, right? And then one thing that we also did from day one that really helped the growth, kind of exponentially. From day one, we shipped to 30 plus countries, right? So I think a lot of brands, they just start just with a US focus or like one country focus. But from day one, we went out to this, how can we impact as many people as possible from day one. And of course, the back end logistic operations, even from a meta targeting perspective, right, is going to be much more challenging when you're going after such a greater market.
Yeah, I guess not complex in channel setup, but very complex from a market perspective, but I guess that's played out. And have you seen strong performance across the majority of those markets, or have you then started to kind of prioritize 2 or 3? Is that what's that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, right now we're still very young, right? I would say, again, we're only like 13 months in there, so we're still seeing quite strong growth across, our top 10 markets, right? So our top markets: U.S., Canada, UK, Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, UAE. And so these markets have done really, really well for us. And so we're seeing growth, across the board.
Makes sense. So yeah, looking at 2026, you mentioned a couple of new channels. I imagine you've got a lot of headroom in many of those markets based on the size and scale they are. But what do you see as the big growth levers to retain that sort of growth rate you've seen in 2025?
Yeah, again, like you mentioned, right? We still believe, the TAM for our segment is incredibly large, and then for some of these markets wise, and we're just getting started, right? There's still a lot of people that haven't tried the product, haven't taken the product, and now we're getting lots of word of mouth referrals in this next 13, 14 days. Given now our brand is 13, 14 months old, right? So a lot of people that have taken it for 3, 6 months, they're experiencing significant benefits to their overall health. So of course, this next level, we in October we also launched a new longevity product that goes hand in hand with the essentials. So again, 26 wise. New channels for our marketing purposes. We're also going to be launching 2 to 3 new SKUs towards the second half of 26. So we believe that will also further the growth. And what we have publicly mentioned in terms of our revenue growth is that it should be approximately 3x from 2025, right? So in 25, our full year was approximately $60 million USD in full year revenue. In 26, we're projecting roughly about 180 to 200 million full year revenue, and which gets us to roughly about a 300 million annual recurring run rate by the end of 26.
Crazy growth. Just to double click on that channel bit, what beyond Facebook and Google, what is, if you're able to share, your next big bet from a channel perspective? I think a big topic across D2C brands right now is like trying to get away from the handcuffs of Facebook and just spending pretty much all of your budget there. So what does that look like for IM8 into 2026?
Yeah, for 26, again, we definitely want to diversify as well as with all these other DTC companies, right? So I think we're looking into, of course, YouTube. We're looking at podcasts. We haven't really done much in podcasts, and of course, that's a big segment in general for supplements. We are looking at TikTok. We're looking at app loving. So we're looking at these few new different channels. Yeah, again, but we want to make sure if we do it, we get really great people that have had significant experience in each of these channels. Otherwise, we can try a channel and then we say, we tried that, doesn't work, right? But it's obviously been working for many other brands. So the idea of when we do design a new channel, how do we do it well with the right people that can execute?
100%. That's a natural segue into the people and resource segment that I really wanted to chat to you about. You obviously came out of the gates with a really high standard of execution across Meta, across those core channels, from a creative perspective to a website perspective, and that was clear from just looking at it, but it's also been clear from the picture of revenue and the growth rate that you've seen through 2025. How did you approach sort of resourcing in that early stage from a growth perspective? One of the things we chat to, and I think a lot of brands struggle with as they grow, is building out the correct org structure to support growth rate. And we've found a few brands towards the back end of last year were almost getting caught short where they hadn't made the right resources decisions 3 months ago to allow them to have enough resource to hit their targets coming into 2026. So I'd love to understand a bit about what that's looked like day one, and then how that's sort of progressed throughout the year.
Yes, great question, right? And I think this is a always moving target, a moving challenge, right? To be fair with you, I think a lot of individuals that was here early on, let's say even in Q1 of last year, majority of them are not here anymore, right? Because I think the reality is, especially from the marketing team, right? I think, we're growing so fast with the growth rate that I have. And then at different stages of the organization, you always need different people, right?
Yeah.
And then so I think that's very key. And again, with employees, with the team, the reality is, you never know if it would fit within your culture until you get them on board, right? And there's no right or wrong, right? And again, for our culture, again, I told the team last week, hey, if you love doing something new every day and just really you like that growth mentality, always learning, always pushing the boundaries, Prenetics or IM8 is a great place for you, right? But we're never going to be a comfortable company, right? Because to be fair, again, I told the team last year, even just last week, right? If we wanted to do 100 million in revenue this year, right? Full year revenue, we'd be very comfortable. I could probably work 2 days a week and then we get there, right? But, that's not what we want to achieve, right? Because I think in a way that's kind of a little bit, boring, right? So I think you have to set out your team. And again, for my role is really thinking, okay, in the next 3, 6, 12 months, who do I need at the organization that can handle this growth? Or if I don't have that individual now, I need to start recruiting for that individual, right? Because I share with the team, my role is kind of like a general manager at a sports team, right? You have the head coach, you have the players as well, and then you have the starters, you have the bench, etc. And our goal is to win a championship. And when we want to win when your goal is to win a championship, you really need all the players, including your bench players, at a really high level, right? But again, this is it's also very difficult, because when you're talking about people, it's always different challenges. There's always emotion that gets into the play, et cetera, et cetera. But when you're wanting to build a championship, then that's kind of how I think about the team and resourcing, right?
Yeah, you're trying to produce unusual outcomes, so you need unusual inputs, I guess. Non-standard inputs, anyway. Do you codify that culture? Like, how do you codify the culture of Prenetics and IM8? Have you got like a modus operandi, I guess, that you reference regularly?
But it's constantly changing, right? But I think, to be fair, in any organization in general, a lot of the culture, it does come down to the founder and CEO, right? We do have a very founder-led organization here. And again, I'm very, very hands-on with a lot of our decisions on a daily basis, right? Because I think, again, at this stage, again, as a 13, because even though we are a 11-year-old company, I feel IM8 is only a 13-month-old company, right? That's how long we've been in business.
Yeah.
So in this type of setting, our speed is our biggest advantage. And we have to act fast while at the same time delivering on quality, right? And then so a lot of times, again, I'm involved in like the trenches, and I think for any brand or any company early on, the founder really dictates the tone and the culture. And this is something you can't outsource to another employee or team member.
Yeah, I really like the frame of like founder's job is also to inject urgency. I think a lot of the time, urgency and pace into the organization that can
to have like and also to unblock blockers, right? Because there'll always be blockers within the organization, right? So something new I just started doing this year, right? Because I was thinking last year, I was like incredibly busy with all the different things on the corporate level that we're doing. Again, keep in mind, we're also a publicly listed company, right? That Prenetics owns 100% of IM8. So we're able to grow so fast in 25. But, we also, again, just to give you a highlight, last year, we sold one of our diagnostics test companies for 72 million USD. We got an investment from Tencent for one of our other subsidiaries. We recently also sold Europa for up to $13 million. We bought Bitcoin in June. Then we stopped buying Bitcoin a few weeks ago, right? So that was all happening. Lots going on while still at the same time running IM8, right? And then so, in many ways, what we wanted to achieve going into 26 is also a focus on execution and results. Yeah. And even for myself, right? I think I was doing way too much last year. And so that's why we started divesting a lot of these assets, because we've seen, IM8, the growth opportunity here is again, I feel it's once in a lifetime. And if we get this right over the next 3 to 5 years, we can literally be one of the world's biggest supplement brands in the world, right? So that means focus on IM8. So what I've done new this year is every single day, I'm dedicating my days to a specific department. So for example, one day could be finance, one day could be operations, supply chain, marketing, growth, retention, investor relations, right? So, and then that simplifies my day in terms of what I know I need to focus on. And then also I think that helps a lot with my team members as well, right? Because they know, specifically they can, have access to me, for a few hours that day. And afterwards, then we can continue email and WhatsApp.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense and simplifies what can be quite a complex. I think it becomes really hard to allocate time as a CEO over time as the business grows and you have to, and the team expands and there's more things to think about. I can't even imagine how many things you've got to think about compared to me in our relatively simple business in comparison. In terms of that team, you mentioned that you've seen a lot of the people who were there earlier in the process leave the business. I think that's not unusual to what I see within a lot of our clients. Like a head of growth or a growth lead for a brand doing 0 to 20 million is functionally very different for a brand going from 20 to 50 or 50 to 100. Have you relied solely on internal resource? Have you lent into agencies? How's that picture looked as you launched, especially across those key channels? And what's the headcount progression look like in some of those key functions?
Yeah, so it's mainly in-house, but we have had agency help in terms of creatives and those things like that, right? In the beginning, before we got started, we leaned on agency. That was easier to get started. Then we took everything in-house. So right now, the majority is done in-house. And then right now, our team is roughly about 40 to 50 individuals. And given where we're at, given the growth expectations in this year wise, even though let's say we want to grow 3x, I do not expect the team size to get more than 10 to 15 additional people.
Yeah. I think that's common with everyone's trying to achieve more with less right now, aren't they? In terms of AI
especially right with all the AI tools that exist today, it's just amazing and incredible, right? So because once you have a lot of people, the problem is it puts too many different layers and decision making actually gets lessened. And I'm not a believer that with more people, things are actually better. Right? I always believe, from my entrepreneur journey, you can do a lot with less people, especially nowadays with so many AI tools at your fingertips.
100%. Where are you seeing AI drive the most value to the business in terms of efficiency gains currently? And then do you expect that to play? Everyone's talking about 2026 being like the year of agents, the year that we really see some of these like balance sheet impacts from AI implementation. Obviously, we saw some of that in 2025, but how do you expect that to play out in your org over the next 12 months?
Yeah, so I think this has been for even before we launched IM8, right? At that time, right when ChatGPT first came out, I was a big proponent of AI across the organization. Right? So every single department, they must use AI in some part of their work and reporting aspects, right? But specifically wise, I think marketing, of course, is a big beneficiary to a lot of these AI tools. Because again, because I would say is even from creatives, ads, brainstorming. There's so much that AI can do to help with that process. So give me a great example, right? So we had one AI video that we launched right before the US Open in September of last year. And this ad was completely done by AI, right? It was also featuring Arina Sabalenka. When we thought it would get like 3 to 4 million views, right? If you go on to our IM8 Health Instagram page, you'll see it racked up 233 million views.
That's crazy.
Right? So insane, right? And I'm sure, you can't fake the Instagram numbers, right? So, even Meta, Instagram, they came to us like, hey, what's going on there? I was like, we're as surprised as you on this, right? But if you get great content, then, this is where, the algorithms by itself will be able to show it to so many people. And when you get such top of funnel awareness, then it becomes much easier to market, everything, retargeting these individuals, right? But we use AI across organizations, especially when you need lots of content out there because of new meta algorithms. I mean, content is king, right? So, and it's just impossible if you have to do it manually.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's where we get the most benefit from AI currently. It's like the research, it's the scripting, it's the concepting, and the time efficiency you can get across there, and the volume, I guess, cost per asset is how you measure that objectively. How you can kind of drive that down over time, and then and
even like things like strategy, right? I mean, I personally use lots of AI just from a strategy perspective, because I think AI is smarter than any one of us, and if you have such a powerful toolkit in front of your fingertips, it's I actually believe with AI, the entrepreneurs that can leverage AI are creating such a big gap over individuals that are not leveraging it, right? I mean, the same with individuals as well. I mean, the gap is actually bigger and bigger, on a daily basis.
Yeah, I saw a tweet over Christmas that was from, I can't remember the account, but it said that we're going to see in 2026, we're going to see those who interface with frontier AI models live in a fundamentally different reality to those who don't, because they're going to be able to produce 7 days work in one. And a lot of the job of individuals in organization is to stay curious about the limits of those models and really try and push the boundaries of what's possible.
Yeah, because I think right now, I mean, the limitation, for any individual or any employee, right, is actually creativity, right? As long as you can think it, AI can produce it, right? So it's like, hey, I think moving forward is how do you create, and creativity is the key thing every individual needs to learn more about, and I think, because knowledge is free nowadays, right? So it's like, hey, how do you, but it's not an easy thing because a lot of times, because a lot of the individuals or employees have been trained like very textbook. Hey, they need to follow a set of rules, set of ways to doing different things. But nowadays, I think the whole, that philosophy is broken.
I also think creativity can sometimes require a different behavior, like not just sat executing all the time. It can require you to get outside, change your routine I know certainly myself, I come up with a lot of my best ideas when I'm not sat looking at a computer all day. And it's just very different behavior. It's interesting to see how how AI and content development you mentioned plays out this year. I think we're going to see a massive rise in AI creative that looks indistinguishable from human creative, and I think that's great in the short term. Not sure about how that plays out long term in terms of platform use, but you guys have already, I think what you guys have got in that expert and that David arena, like I feel like those sort of personalities become more valuable in a world when you can create indistinguishable content from all your competitors is like a real differentiator. So really interested to see how that plays out. What does your meta creative journey look like? That's a lot of what we talk about on this podcast is very tactical, creative strategy, creative output for Facebook. How was your volume process? What surprised you about that strategy? Any key learnings that maybe some of our audience could take into their business?
Yeah, I think the reality, or I mean, that's to share. I think early on when we were on this journey, let's say like, in January of last year, right? I think we're doing like maybe 700,000-800,000 monthly revenue, right? I think you spend a lot of time in the creative journey, right? And thinking about hey, what do you think is going to work? Do you think that A, B, C, D, blah, blah, blah is going to work, and etc. But the reality is each one of us has our own biases and we really don't know what's going to work, right? We may have an idea, but no one knows what's going to ultimately work. And then so we've moved away from personal biases to have just a lot of different ideas and content and just testing now. I think ultimately you just have to have lots of testing to be able to figure out and pick out the winners that you can then multiply with, right? I think a key thing is just making sure that you stay on brand. I think that's fundamentally really, really important because you also don't want to test and it, doesn't stay on brand, right? Because again, we have a premium brand. We have a science-backed product. So I think it's just testing velocity. So for example, right now, we're testing, even statics, upwards to about 800 to 1,000 ads on a weekly basis.
Crazy volume.
But when we started, we're testing with like 50, right? So,
I agree. I think in that early phase, it also that workflow is where you can learn a lot about the customer and what resonates, and then that could inform a lot more about the overall marketing mix and message, which is really, really valuable. It's huge volume. I agree on the bias and feel like when you can almost get caught up in like the minutiae of that creative process and trying to perfect every asset, be like you need to be intentional with your tests and they need to be grounded in a hypothesis, but you are still playing an outlier game, right? It's like we're trying to find those outlier ads that can drive real significant spend growth. I
think two parts, right? I would say your website, your homepage, that needs to be very, very intentional. Right. And then, but then even with that, then you can test with CRO optimization, etc. But I think the ads part, I think, again, you just need lots of content, lots of different variations and stay on brand with it. Right.
Yeah. I think, again, for those watching, go and look at IM8's funnels. I think they're best in class. A lot of brands spend too much time on creative and not enough time on website right now. They're not being as intentional in that stage. I feel like you guys have just got that combination down from day one, and that's contributed to such crazy growth.
Yeah, because you look at every single module that we have on the website, even the homepage, right? There's a specific reason for it. And we may have actually, and if you look at it, it's a very long website, right? Yeah. And we put a lot of educational pieces on the product, the backstory, David Beckham co-founding and et cetera, et cetera. But every module has its place because ultimately, we are selling a premium product, a premium supplement product, and you really need to educate the customer in terms of what are they actually getting and why they should be paying, such price for it, right?
100%. We've talked about acquisition quite a lot there. Obviously, your CAC to LTV profile is best in class as well, and I think that's contributed to the profitability gains you've seen towards the end of last year. Did the quality of those cohorts surprise? I imagine as you're growing so fast, you're still learning quite a bit there. But did the quality of that surprise you as well from sort of day one? Or just talk a bit about that journey as well.
Yeah. So the cohorts, right? And of course, we been able to grow significantly in the last. Basically, the last 6 months of 25. Yeah, so those cohorts were still understanding their behavior, right? But I think thus far, we do see a very good CAC to LTV ratio, right? And we haven't specifically mentioned it because it's constantly changing. But I do believe in the next, in 2026, we'll have a very good idea, what these CAC to LTV ratios. But of course, industry standard is looking at about a 1 to 3, or 3 to 1 from a CAC to LTV ratio, right? So that's what our target is.
Yeah, I feel like it's the growth rate you're seeing. Obviously, there's a lot of there, like you say, there's that confidence. You need to get that confidence in the actual metric, and I think a lot of brands overstep prematurely. Work towards a CAC to LTV that they don't have full confidence or clarity in. What are your big plays on what you've obviously brought out a new longevity product? Is most of your plays towards LTV growth going to be product driven into the 2026 and beyond?
Great question, right? So I think something we recently introduced, which we felt is actually quite a big I think for any brand to think about and doing, right? So last month we actually introduced a 90-day supply. Right. And then so this actually increased AOV quite significantly as well. Yeah. Right. So, and we couldn't previously do this because as a new brand, no one's going to buy upfront 3 months of your supply. Right. until they see the social proof, they talk to their friends and family, et cetera, right? But we've actually been very surprised at the uptake that we've seen on the 90-day supply. And again, just give you an example, right? So our Daily Ultimate Essentials, and then we've only rolled it out in the US before launching it worldwide, right? So it was previously $89, for a monthly supply, and then $89 for the monthly subscription. And then in December, we launched a 3-month subscription that you pay $78 monthly or $235 on a one-time basis, and then auto renews for 3 months. Right? When we did that, our average order value went from $150 to $200 USD overnight.
Jesus, big jump.
Yeah, big jump. And then so what that does is actually it lowers our payback period, quite significantly, right? Because the payback period is a metric I look at very closely on a daily basis, right? Because this is basically how we allocate cash, et cetera, right? So our previous payback period was roughly about 3.9 months. And then when we did this 90-day program wise, right, you're looking at roughly about 2.5 to 3 months in terms of the payback period. Yeah, so it's quite significant. Of course, again, to be fair, I don't have quantified data to share because we only rolled this out last month. But by default, I would imagine this has to increase our retention rates as well.
Yeah, you'd expect AOV is like a leading indicator of LTV usually, isn't it? So as your AOV goes up, you'd expect your cohort value to go up as well. Have you seen
your retention rates to improve as well, right? Because again, once you have people consistently on your product for 60, 90 days, they'll feel the effects, right? Better energy, better gut health, sharper thinking, better sleep. And then so once they do that, then of course, then your retention will improve, right? So it was a big, I would say, quite big change for us. And again, because now we have established this brand, people are willing to make that investment with a 3-month purchase.
Makes sense. I think that habitualization is such an underappreciated part of a supplement brand. One of the key things that you see on their cancellation reasons is just having too much product. And that's a signal that they've just not managed to habitualize and ritualize consumption enough. But it's a very hard problem to solve. This how do you get people to build a habit in their life around consumption? So that's super interesting.
Olly, I think one thing I want to mention on that 90-day push, which I think will be relevant for your audience, because I'm sure it's like a lot of DTC operators and such, right? Because we didn't just launch the 90-day supply with just a discount. We launched it because we're always thinking, what value can we provide to the customer, right? And again, what do we have that other brands may not have? So we're leveraging our scientific advisory board and our key performance board as well. So what we're providing for individuals that subscribe to the 90-day plan, we're giving you access to a master class from our scientific advisory board, the likes of Dr. Dawn from Mayo Clinic, right? So she'll talk to you on a group setting. You can ask any questions. You get access to Bobby Rich, David Beckham's trainer, right? So I'm sure there's a lot of questions. Hey, I want to train like David, right? And it's like, how do I do that, correct? So you get access to 8 of our leading S8 and these are all doctors, world-class trainers, etc. So you get access to these individuals on a 90-day basis. So again, and this is free, right? So I think ultimately we're building that community, and we don't want to just sell product, but we want to get people fit, healthy, and through this lifestyle.
100%. It's a really novel way to look at perceived value and other ways to drive value to the consumer other than just giving more products, discounting, gifts with purchase. I think that's super interesting. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners can reflect on their own business and find ways to do something similar. They're not going to be able to copy what you guys have done there with those names, but give guides, resources, community. There's so many different ways to approach that problem. Well, we're coming up to the end now. I could go on and ask a million more questions, but I'd love to just get a rundown. 2026, we've already touched on a few areas, but to summarize it, are we looking at just market expansion, channel expansion and product expansion? Do we have any other big plans for IM8 looking into the rest of this year?
Now we're also going to be announcing a few new, big ambassadors, coming on board. All right. So I think this
Nice.
is always an evolution. Again, I think, David, Arena, amazing. Yeah. But I think this brand, again, we're trying to create a true global community of individuals, which want to perform at their best. And we're adding a few individuals, in the next, few months here. I think that will be very exciting.
Amazing. I'm excited to keep an eye on who they are, and what areas they're operating in. But yeah, thank you very much for joining me, Danny. Thank you for giving away so much value and such an insight into the growth rate of the brand. And yeah, where can everyone watching find you?
LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a good spot, right? We're trading under Prenetics, PRE. Yeah, so that's also a good spot as well.
Perfect. Well, yeah, thank you very much. Thank you all for watching. We'll catch you next week on another episode.